Thanks very much, Michelle. Could we just close that door there, please? Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first Cabinet meeting of the new municipal year. We're back in the Council House, where the facing rooms have been refurbished. They're almost completed. You will not fail to have noticed in this room that the windows have been cleaned, which makes the room far brighter. And there is a schedule now to continue to clean the windows as we go forward. Okay, on with the meeting. Item 1 is notice of recording to advise everyone present that this meeting will be webcast for live or subsequent broadcast on the Council's YouTube site. Members of the press, the public and anyone else may take photographs and make recordings if you wish to do so. Item 2 is apologies, and I have apologies from 3 City Council officers, Peter Bishop, Deborah Cadman and Julie Griffin. Are there any other apologies?
I'm here, Becky Hello.
Becky Hello with Sarah Pitt substituting. We could note all of those then, please. Item 3 is declarations of interest. Anybody wish to declare interest in respect of any of this morning's agenda items? Item 4 then, exempt information and possible exclusion of the press and the public. There are exempt appendices in respect of items 8 and 16. Does anybody wish to raise anything on these exempt appendices? John?
Could we talk about item 8, pen private, please?
In which case then we'll take item 8 at the end of the agenda. I need to just formally then inform everyone that we will go into private session when we consider item 8 to consider those matters that are on the private appendix, and we'll then return to public session to consider the recommendations. So if I could just formally move the resolution that's printed on the agenda paper. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Moving on then, item 5 is the Rough Sleepers initiative. Shannon.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to take this report as read, but the basis of the report is to retrospectively accept or seek approval for funding that we've managed to get from DULA in terms of the Rough Sleeping initiative. And you will know that Birmingham has made some strides when it comes to reducing rough sleeping across the city. 2018, it was at 91, sorry, and now it's down to about 25 to 30. But obviously we want to go much further with the current pressures across the country in regards to various things, including the cost of living. We know there's going to be huge pressures. So this is asking for us to accept the funding. And also just to say that this includes money for extending the Housing First initiative that's been taking place across the region. Birmingham's part of that. And also that it's not just Birmingham City Council that are supporting this agenda, it's also the voluntary sector as well that have been making huge inroads working in partnership with us. And that has been quite successful because we know that we don't have the capability, the skills sometimes to do it all. We're really working closely and in collaboration with our partners. So I just ask that everybody accepts the recommendations as listed out in the report.
Thank you, Sharon. Any comments, John?
If I may, and thank you for this. It's good that so much progress has been made. Do you have a figure for how many people in the course of a year say are rough sleeping, as opposed to just a nightly figure? I was trying to get some perspective on how many individuals are passing through the system, so to speak. And my second question was, how good do we feel the support is after we get people off the streets? Because I think there's a real concern that some people pick up sort of bad habits, particularly around begging when they're homeless, and how they're supported to get to change their lifestyle and not to depend on that kind of income.
Let's take all the questions. Robert?
Thank you, and obviously very much welcome the funding from the government and the bid itself. Just wanted to pick up the fact that these recommendations are again asking for retrospective approval. So if you think back to the most recent auditor's letter, they picked up this as being an issue, and their recommendation 15 said the council should strengthen its arrangements to ensure that appropriate formal approval is provided for key decisions before any necessary submission to significant third parties, including government. In this case, the programme was announced in November, application released in January, and the deadline was the end of February. So there was plenty of time and cabinet meetings during that period when cabinet could have considered this bid in advance of it being submitted. So what's being done to actually make sure we meet the recommendation of the auditor's letter and start having these things considered prior to submission, not afterwards?
Okay, so I'll go to Councillor Orban's point first. I know that on some occasions that when it comes to funding, particularly around things that concern crisis, the government does have a habit of actually giving short deadlines of when things need to turn around. And also it does include a lot of consultation with the civil servants to make sure that this actually gets right. In terms of the specific one, I'll let Gary answer that one because I don't know the details in terms of the timelines on this one.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. To answer your question there, Councillor, it's very difficult and it's very challenging, but Councillor Thompson is absolutely right. We're given a very short time frame by government. We get an estimate of what we think we're going to get, but they don't actually confirm it. So until we've got a confirmed figure, it's very difficult for us to actually sort of like give you that reassurance, put those wheels in motion, so to speak, to have it in front of you beforehand. So we are relying completely at the mercy of government in terms of funding. I should say, though, that it should be sort of seen as a huge compliment across the country, really. They've given 3 years funding because that provides security and surety in terms of funding our partners who work so diligently with us to actually ensure that we keep roughly good numbers low.
So when did the bid go in?
The bid went in, it had to be by the end of March. Well, sorry, end of Feb, as you said. We weren't going to know to the end of March whether we were successful and how much we were going to get. So all we can do is flag up that sort of like that direction of travel, so to speak. But we can't put anything that's firm in place until we've been given assurance and it's been confirmed from government exactly how much we're going to get.
When was that confirmation?
That confirmation came, I think, at the end of March. So it's April that we're going to get, and I think that's one for the report today.
Okay. Other points? I'll come back to you now.
Okay, then so I'll let Ian come back on that point at the end. But again, I guess the other part of that question really is down to the government side, which I'm assuming that Ian can cover. In terms of the numbers of people that are sleeping, in terms of Councillor Hunt's question, the government expects us to do a snapshot once a year, which we all know in terms of the official count. But Birmingham is always in the habit of doing this throughout the year. So we like to look at the live data as that's going through. In addition to that, we also like to do that to make sure that we're looking at the numbers, how they fluctuate in different seasons, because sometimes that makes an impact. And if anything else is happening across the city, that might change that. In terms of the actual figure, in terms of the last 12 months, yeah, I'll let Gary answer that one because I don't have any.
It's a very good question, and I think we've got to appreciate there's 3 types. There's flow, there's returners, and there's stock, which is basically your in trade. Flow is how many numbers come through the street every year. Birmingham, we get that 500 that come through the street every year. The reason we keep the numbers low is we've got an incredibly effective sector we work very closely with, so we move people off the streets as quickly as we possibly can, because once you allow them to embed into the streets, they develop a street lifestyle. So the movement is huge in terms of the flow, and that's why we have such few numbers, because we carry out intelligence counts, intelligence work 24/7 a week, and therefore we're ahead of the game all the time. But in terms of your original question, about 500.
So it's about 500 then in terms of the flow. We keep tracking those just in case they end up coming back on the streets, and then it's just consistently monitoring. But any one given time, in terms of the snapshot, roughly at the moment it is between 20 and 30 at the moment. So that goes to show a huge amount of work's been done across the year to get those people off the streets and actually stop them from falling back onto the streets. In terms of the first question that Councillor Hunt asked, which was around after support, we have really strong partnerships across the city, which does consider after support. The Housing First model is set up around that actually, so that they're given support when they move into the property, but they're also continue for about at least a year or two after. And that's just to make sure that they also support in making sure that they just don't fall back into debt or anything else like that. So Housing First is very good at that. Prior to Housing First, Birmingham City Council and the partners have always worked closely on making sure that we track people. And again, that's why we also include the numbers in terms of the people that have flow, so those that come off the streets and then may go back up. But I just want to also point out that the important part for us is not just getting people off the streets and the after support, which is absolutely critical, but it's also getting into that early intervention prevention space to stop people from falling up and going into crisis in the first place, because that's where we really need to put more of our efforts, and that's where the council is going at the moment. So those works do take place with Councillor Hunt.
Robert.
Thank you. And obviously the 3-year settlement report is very welcome. But I think there's been a bit of confusion because obviously I wasn't talking about, and neither was the auditors, reports accepting the amount awarded. Clearly, you can't know how much you're going to be awarded until the closing of the ceremony. The process. What I was talking about was the bid and having approval for the bid for funding. And clearly, you can know how much you're bidding for in advance of the closure of the process. So I was asking what work is being done to make sure that in future bids are brought in a timely manner for cabinet approval prior to submission, as recommended by the auditor. And you know, we are very flexible here. The process that was done with the levelling up bids before, and I'm sure will be done again this time, where you bring a scoping document, for want of a better word, so there's an idea, is a perfectly, from my point of view, understandable way of doing it. So there must be a way of being able to bring some kind of information in a more timely manner.
Well, just one second. I'm just going to bring Graham in. Graham.
Thank you, Leader. No, all I was going to say was we have had a lot of examples recently, including in housing area, but also refugees, asylum seekers and so on, where we've had really quite ludicrous timescale to be able to bring things into cabinet. And it is a timing issue often. So if we can't get it to cabinet, we will take it through the appropriate process, which we need to get cabinet members signing. So,
Well, there are words in paragraph 1.2. So due to time constraints, it was not possible to seek full cabinet approval for the bid at the time. We might get some further explanations to that in a moment. However, approval was sought for the submission of the bid from the cabinet member and director at DMT in February of 2022. Sharon.
And I was just going to echo the points that I think Graham beat to on those points. Again, the government gives incredibly tight time with turnarounds, and the amount of work that has to go into these bids, because I have read them, is a huge amount of detail that needs to go in, not just from one department, but cross departments across the council, and also need to consult with our partners in the third sector and elsewhere. So it is not possible in terms of constraints on officers' time and dealing with the day-to-day work that they've got to do, or will be able to get this in time. I know it's not ideal. However, if the government gave us more longer deadlines, then maybe we could meet some of those. But I'm happy to do a cross-party letter to government and ask them for that.
Right.
Okay.
Ask the government to fix Birmingham's process.
Making sure that they give us time.
You have 3 months.
I wonder, Gary, is there anything you can add to the words, it was not possible to seek full cabinet approval for the bid at the time, which was February of this year?
Yeah, I think Councillor Thompson has outlined it. We need to sort of probably during the process. But the issue remains, I think there's a small point there about a cross sort of collaboration partnership. We're quite heavily reliant in terms of going out to our partners and actually sort of having a discussion to actually ensure that we've got everything covered in terms of what we're looking for and it meets the needs of the community. But I get your point.
Okay, as Councillor Alden has pointed out, this is a recommendation from our auditor. So I've asked the interim city solicitor if you just have a look at the process here to make sure that if we are able to bring something into cabinet as was described by Councillor Alden, as we have done with the levelling up bids, then that is the process we should be looking to follow. Ewan, was there anything you wished to add?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, just listening to the conversation, why there could have even been reference to it in a March cabinet or something like that, even, you know, just to give cabinet a heads up kind of thing.
Yeah, well, as I've said, I've asked the interim city solicitor to have a look at the process here to make sure that if we are able to do as you've just indicated, then that is what we do in future. So with that, can we agree recommendations 2.1 through to 2.5? That agreed? Thank you. Item 6 then, homelessness reduction, new burdens grant funding, acceptance and expenditure. Sharon?
Thank you very much, Linda. So again, I'm asking for acceptance for just over £2.6 million, and this is for new burdens grants. These grants originally confirmed by DULOC in December 21 for the financial years of 22 to 23. The purpose of this particular funding is to assist local authorities when it comes to implementing some of the additional responsibilities that we have in terms of the Homeless Reduction Act. So seeking for Cabinet to approve that we get that money to come in for the reasons that we've outlined on the previous item. And it's just also to say that, you know, this will help to provide capacity to increase the supply of and access to different forms of accommodation as well, including private rented units, and prevent homelessness from across the sector's point of view. Thank you very much.
Any questions or comments on this, Ewan?
I just make a comment that it's obviously welcoming government money on this, as obviously is said. It's government money to fund additional costs of legislational changes, and seems a reasonable allocation of resources. So yeah, as a group, we definitely welcome it. So thank you.
Thank you. If I could just move one drafting amendment in paragraph 2.3, the report's been overtaken by new Cabinet portfolios. So 2.3 should read, following consultation with the Cabinet member for housing and homelessness. We just make that one amendment, please. And then can we agree paragraphs 2.1 through to 2.4? Can I agree? Thank you. Item 7 then is enhanced partnership amendments to plan and scheme extents. Liz.
Thanks very much, Leader. Listen, I'd just like to say I'm delighted that the first report that I get to present at Cabinet is about buses in Birmingham, which is a topic close to my heart. And I'm also delighted to be part of a Cabinet where there are a number of regular bus users like this lady and a number of others. So I think this is an item which is a good news story, you know, for bus passengers in the city. So really, what it's about the extension of the enhanced partnership area across the whole of the West Midlands Combined Authority area. What we've got already in place is a city centre advanced quality partnership scheme. That's a bit of a mouthful. But that already provides a minimum standard for bus services within Birmingham city centre. And it's a partnership between the City Council, Transport for the West Midlands and bus operators. But the crucial point to note here is that it expires on the 9th of July 2022, so very imminently. So, you know, our preferred mechanism now to ensure quality bus provision is an enhanced partnership. And the colleagues who've been in Cabinet or coming to Cabinet meetings for a while will probably remember the discussion in 2019 about instituting an enhanced partnership for the sprint corridors for the A34 and A45. But now we need to ensure that high quality bus infrastructure and service provision is available in the city in time for the Commonwealth Games. And we need to protect as well the investment included in the West Midlands Bus Services Improvement Plan. So that's why it's absolutely crucial that we now extend the enhanced partnerships geographical coverage to include the city centre. So this report is asking Cabinet to note that Transport for the West Midlands is proposing to amend the enhanced partnership to cover the whole of the West Midlands CA area, and that will include replacing the Advanced Quality Partnership Scheme from its expiry date. It also proposes that Cabinet delegates to the Assistant Director, Transport and Connectivity, in consultation with myself, authority to negotiate and finalise any specific facilities and measures which are proposed to be added to the extended enhanced partnership scheme when those are the responsibility of us as Birmingham City Council. And when we're talking about measures, what we mean is bus lanes, so bus priority, bus stops and shelters, passenger information and ticketing, and vehicle standards. And we have an ambition that all buses entering the clean air zone will be zero emission by 2030, although that is subject to further funding. But I think that's a really important commitment. And there is 2036 as a backstop, but I personally, as a Cabinet member, will be pushing for 2030 in line with the Route to Zero climate change action plan. Highway maintenance, parking enforcement, bus lane enforcement and roadworks will remain the responsibility of the City Council in accordance with existing procedures and legal powers. And once the council commitments are included in the enhanced partnership, then the council is required to provide those facilities and measures. And if any are to be removed, then the enhanced partnership variation process will need to be followed. And that will mean consultation with Transport for the West Midlands and the bus operators. But in summary, I think this is very good news for bus passengers in the city. It's urgent because the current arrangements expire on the 9th of July. And I hope that I get everyone's support for this report today. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Liz. As is the commitment in the bus service improvement plan, that all buses in the West Midlands will be zero emission by 2030. It's something that Birmingham pushed for in that plan, and it's good to see that it's come through. John.
Thank you. And thank you for that explanation, and welcome to your new post, Councillor Clements.
Thanks, Councillor Hunt.
You answered one of my questions, which was to have some more detail of what the enhanced plan actually delivers across the region, because I wasn't sure. It felt to me, reading this, is it was mostly about Sprint, and I wanted to know more about what it's going to deliver across the region for all bus services. I think you did answer part of that. I was involved 10 years ago in setting up the quality partnership for the city centre, and that is obviously right, it moves on now, and this is the way of doing it. I've got some questions around the Sprint service, particularly around the timetable, because from what you're saying, the idea is to bring in Sprint in time for the Commonwealth Games, which is quite soon. As a councillor representing one of the wards affected by it and the bus services, I think everybody will want to know what changes are in the pipeline. In particular, I had some questions around the powers that this gives on the enhanced partnership scheme in terms of Sprint, because that allows other bus services to be excluded from Sprint routes. In other words, potentially from the new bus lanes that are in place for buses. And there's big anxiety in our neck of the woods that some of the existing bus services, both the stopping service, the 51, and the express service, the X51, will be driven out by Sprint. And there's never been any clarity in terms of what the expectation is in terms of the mix of bus services will be going forward.
I'll take all the questions.
Okay.
Come back.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, I'm a big fan of the buses as well. I think that I used to have a pass, but I think the flexible system now that you can get on with the capping, etc., that you've got, it's either tied into a Swift Go card or your debit card over 3, 5 or 7 days, is the sort of thing that I think encourages people to use public transport. I myself think it's sort of very encouraging that you don't have to invest money up front. You can just use it and, you know, find well what you're going to spend. So I think it's excellent. I think the only question that I had was what's the view on the viability, etc., that you're looking at with the new way of working, etc., people working from home, not coming into city centre, etc. Sort of, I've seen that certainly from when I'm on the train or the bus, there seems to be less people on it than there used to be sort of pre-pandemic. Are these numbers returning, or is this having an effect on sort of bus services going forward?
Thank you, and congratulations, Councillor Clements, to your new role. Just wanted to first of all declare an interest because my councillor appointed on the Transport Delivery Committee of the Transport for West Midlands. Obviously, Transport for West Midlands are mentioned in here, and also just to flag, particularly welcome the zero emissions commitment in here. And it is, as Councillor Hunt touched on, it is in some ways poetic that this latest version of the bus partnership for Birmingham City Centre comes to this committee when Councillor Ward, Councillor Hunt and myself were all involved in the setting up of the first one 10 years ago.
Great, I'm delighted that this report has generated so many questions. I've got Andy Chidgey here to answer the more detailed questions, and he's the author of this excellent report. I mean, on just a couple of observations, I agree with you, and that the advances in Swift ticketing, I think, have changed people's lives. And what was transformational for me was actually contactless payment on the buses. I think that's actually, really changed my life. And sorry, that makes me sound very sad, but actually having to scrabble around for change and having to pay with a pound coin and, being effectively having a surcharge 105 pence as it was for a long time used to really annoy me. So I mean, it's those really basic things that make a difference to people's experience on using all public transport, but particularly buses. I'm going to hand over to Andy in a minute, but on the detailed questions from Councillor Hunt on Sprint, I mean, obviously there was already an enhanced partnership scheme for the 2 Sprint routes, and from the deluge of briefings that I've had in the last couple of weeks, my understanding is that the Sprint will become operational in 2024. But I will defer to Andy to answer your more detailed questions. And on Councillor Mackey's questions about levels of passengers returning to buses, and I think again I wonder if Andy might help up with some percentages. My perception is that numbers are coming back, but they're nothing like what they were pre-pandemic. And I think we've got a job to do to encourage people back onto public transport. And that's why I am particularly exercised about the Midland Metro starting to run again this week. I will be absolutely delighted to see it running. But I think but we know that buses are absolutely the workhorses of public transport in this city. Most people who are using public transport are travelling by bus. So we're doing everything that we can do to make the experience of using a bus pleasant, quick, and easy. That's an absolute priority for this council. Andy, could you deal with some of the more detailed questions on the Sprint?
The last I heard, this might not be completed. The government support for the bus industry, I think, expired in September or October this year. So there is a need to do more to try and get people back on the bus. Otherwise, it will become more of a spiral down and services having to be cut and so on. In terms of Councillor Hunt's question about bus lanes, I think legally the Sprint bus facilities, bus lanes legally are the same as any other bus lane, so any operator, any service can use them. I think the only difference perhaps, some of the technology, some of the sort of bus branches, the little cars that go on the bus in terms of traffic signals and detect them, I think some of that might be only on certain services, so either Sprint or express services. But unless West Midlands goes down the line, things like franchising, any facilities that Gary Jenkins are very much operating to use. I think that National Express are doing some tweaks to the timetable around sort of completion of work in Peloton and Commonwealth Games, but as Council kind of said, that's like before, sort of with facilities for some time again, the rules changes, in terms of what services will express, what stop is going to. Was there anything else?
No, I think
that was very comprehensive.
You've covered it all. I just wanted to add what you've said, actually, about the return of passenger numbers to buses, because it is, as you point out, somewhere between 80 and 90% at the moment, but that does have a consequence. Alongside the falling out of government support this autumn, it will have an impact on services across the West Midlands. And indeed, already the 144 service, which is the route from Worcester into Birmingham, has been altered by the bus operator, and there's now a campaign in Bromsgrove to try and get the 144 reinstated. So we can see that there are real consequences to how people will be able to move around if the government do taper off their support as they intend currently to do. Liz, anything you want to add further?
No, just on the 144, because obviously I represent a ward in the south of the city, so I've been very aware of that campaign, and I think that is a consequence of Worcestershire County Council's bus service improvement bid not being successful. So I think we should congratulate TfWN on the excellent BSIP bid that they made. But I do think that is going to that is a reduction in the quality of life for people who are travelling in from Worcester, from Bromsgrove into the city centre. And I myself have used that 144 service because it does stop on Bristol Road at the by Oak Tree Lane. So yes, it's been very sad to see that, and it's a service that's existed for over 100 years. So we need to go out there and champion bus services, and I hope that that the discussions about bus franchising are approached in a positive way, because I think that we need to look at public transport as a public service there to make people's lives easier. Thanks, Leader.
Thank you. Thank you, Liz. This is to be welcomed. I think it's an initiative. As someone who uses buses most days of the week, I want the system to be as clean, efficient and user-friendly as possible. It was brilliant last night for me to come into the city centre to an event at the Exchange, and buses are going from Harborne, where I live, down Broad Street. But one of the things that occurred to me is we've got these wonderful new bus shelters that look very attractive, but there's no information on them in terms of what number buses come in and what the times are and frequency. So I'm hoping that as the system embedded, it will improve that information better. Thank you.
I agree. That's really important, because I think there's an assumption that everyone's got a smartphone and they can tap into whatever app. There's sort of many apps. Yes, and there are lots of things. I've got TWM app. I've got the Barrel app for the bikes. I've got this, that, and the other. But I think information in the stop is really important. Do you want to add anything on that, Andy?
No, I mean, I can pass that on to others.
Yeah.
Then some of the stops out there which don't have information, often with metro stop, metro is still to be extended down.
Right.
Thank you. Okay, can we agree then? Recommendations 2.1 through to 2.6. All agree?
Agreed.
Item 8 we'll return to at the end of the agenda. So 9 is Baskerville School, approval for capital works with expansion and remodelling of key stages 4 and 5 provision and remodelling of complex needs provision. Karen.
I've got an interesting mix of reports for you this morning, starting with this one. At Baskerville School, approval for the full business case, and to note the contract award. The capital cost scheme will not exceed £1,823,776. Baskerville currently offers 162 places for pupils with moderate or severe learning difficulties, autism, and social, emotional and mental health needs. And this scheme will increase capacity to 190 places. Very welcome. The project will remodel the existing needs building to create a food technology area, an ICT suite and a classroom on the first floor. There will be further work on existing modular units to provide 3 classrooms and sensory rooms, staff space, life skills teaching space, and changing places standard toilet provision, which is really important. And subject to approval, the proposed scheme will start later this month and be completed by September.
Thank you very much. Any comments on this, Shane?
Yeah, just welcome it. I think it's an extra 28 places for SEND provision, much needed in the city, so we welcome them. Obviously, we'd all like to see some more, but I think this is very welcome. I think it's all funded through the High Needs Allocation Fund, and yeah, I think it's good news. So yeah, we'll welcome it.
Thank you very much. In which case then, can we agree recommendations 2.1 through to 2.4? Agreed. Thank you. Item 10 then is Minworth Junior and Infant School approval for capital works to replace dilapidated early years, Stage 1 Terrapin classrooms. Karen.
So we're looking for approval for business case and the contract scheme as set out in Appendix A. The capital cost of this scheme is £1,113. And Minworth Junior Infant is a one-form entry mixed community school within the Minworth ward. It was rated by Ofsted in 2019. They currently have 3 terrapin huts used for their youngest children, and these were originally temporary provision installed between 1971 and 1980, and then poor condition. So the project seeks approval to replace these huts with a purpose-built modern space using school condition allocation funding. And again, subject to approval, works will start later this month. And the internal works will be completed in time for the start of the autumn term, and full completion will take place by October 22.
Thank you. Any comments on this one? No? In which case then, can we agree with recommendations 2.1 through to 2.4? So agreed.
Agreed.
Right, item 11. This is a very important report on today's agenda. It's Children and Families Directorate Improvement Programme Update and Resources Requirement. Karen again.
This report sets out the improvement programme which is underway in children and families. We are completely aware that there is still a long way to go, but there is a robust improvement plan in place, and we're beginning to see much needed improvement in our services for children, young people and families in the city. I'm going to bring Sue Harrison, who is our director, in to set out some of the improvements and progress.
Sue.
You're still muted, Sue. No.
It's like 2020 all over.
Yeah, we've made it. Sorry about that. I was kind of so keen to get into explaining what the progress was that yeah, I've neglected to unmute myself. Thank you. So you'll see from the report, which is quite a long and complicated report, that there are some signs of green shoots already, and that we're taking a really robust to our improvements across the directorate. And I'm happy to take any questions on that, but basically you've heard me talk before about our vision that all children need to be able to thrive in Birmingham. And in order to be able to thrive, all children need to feel safe, they need to feel healthy, they need to be included, and they need to be confident, and then they will learn and then they will achieve and thrive and fulfil the potential that they've got, because every child has got talents, and it's our job to help them realise those in order that they can thrive and be the best people that they can be. And that's just a wonderful position to be in, to be able to put those services in place to support those young people. But recognising from the baselining work that we started to do that there is a long way to go for some of our services to be able to wrap around children in the way that we want them to, working in partnership across the system. And basically what this report sets out is, through the baselining, we're gathering evidence that I'll be able to present to you in even more detail, that says where we're doing well and where we need to do better. There has been a problem in the past with our directorate and the ability of our directorate to show that data and have reliable data that shows where the key performance areas are and that shows improvement. So we will be in a position to do that, and all the time we're getting stronger. However, the ask of this cabinet is to support our request to start immediately to recruit more capacity to our leadership team. We know that we need to work with schools as organisations, because there are some areas that affect children's lives that we still worry about, such as their attendance at school. And there are some things that we need to have, there's some areas where we want to have conversations with schools holistically to help them be supportive and say, well, what are you doing whole school attendance? So there are some conversations that we have with schools and multi-academy trusts on an organisational level. But there is also a lot of casework and responsibility for individual children through, for example, the youth service, through our alternative provision and through our virtual school. So we want to create an additional post for an assistant director for thriving children and families, to enable us to have that overview and grip on our vulnerable children who do not meet the criteria for Birmingham Children's Trust, and who will, we don't want them to meet the criteria for Birmingham Children's Trust, because we want to reduce the demand in statutory services. And I'm putting before you a request for that role. We have got the funding within the directorate's budget to be able to deliver that role. Again, we want to make a permanent leadership team, because really conscious that we need stability in children's services leadership. So this will be a permanent post, and it will be somebody that can support me in having that oversight of vulnerable children, working in partnership, of course, across the system, and also enabling me to stabilise the kind of post-16 and skills arena by enabling me to recruit to that post permanently as well, to make sure we have got adequate leadership, particularly to deliver the breaking down barriers. So there's a request to kind of go ahead with those recruitment posts now. And also in that report, it states our intention to come back in September, when the baselining across the whole directorate will have been done, when we'll have completed our restructure proposals for the SEND service, to come back to Cabinet in September with kind of the final report that says this is the state of the nation in the Children's Services Directorate, and this is how we're going to move forward. But hopefully the report's giving you a good flavour of the processes and basic systems that we've begun to put in place, and we will continue to put in place, so that we're becoming a more proactive service and a bit less reactive, and a bit more aspirational as well for our children and young people. And hopefully that report gives you a flavour of that.
Thank you, Sue. Any questions on this? Yeah.
Thank you, Ian. We've been very supportive of what's come to Cabinet so far. And as you say, this is an important and long and complicated report. And there's sort of three bits that I picked out from it, really. I think looking at it, again, we've got another robust plan. I think all the previous ones were equally called robust. I think there's an element of a bit more of, it looks to be a bit more of the same, having read a lot of the previous reports that we're going to resolve this very important area. We've got expensive consultants coming in. They're really just saying what parents have been saying for years. I feel the Commissioner's given the Council one last chance here before it goes to a trust model. When you look at the success of the Birmingham Children's Trust, I think I might feel more comfortable if you just went straight to a trust model, actually, because, just putting the children first and just seeing that Birmingham's Children's Trust is performing so well. The second point I was going to make was on the risk management section. If having read it, if I was to paraphrase it, it really seems just to be saying, if you don't agree with this, there'll be no improvements made. I think there's a bit more to a risk management section for that. I mean, there's no talk of failure of getting wider organisation buy-in. The report itself talks about a churn in leadership of DCS posts, but there's no mention of that in the risk report. I think that if the report itself refers to a risk, you would have thought the risk report would pick that up. And there's no real sort of mitigations in it. I think some of the reports we've seen come to cabinet, I think it was last cabinet meeting, there was one report came with no risk report. So I just think that this is something that is a wider scenario. I think probably some of these reports need a bit more attention to detail on that. And the IT system was the last thing you probably expected to mention it. And there's been a significant investment in that. There's promised improvements to come off the back of this. The Commissioner talks about implementation of improvements via the IT system by September 22, but I noticed the report itself talks about phase 2's implementation taking place between 23 and 2025. And so you can see my sort of uneasy that we're saying, oh, this is going to solve everything. And yet the report itself and the Commissioner's statement don't always seem to be lining up here. And I'm just wondering if Is this really the result that we're looking for, or are we just looking for this is another sticking plaster and we'll end up going to go in for a trust model? These are the concerns that I've got with it, must be honest, Dean. Thank you.
I think in all fairness, Ewan, the report's quite clear. This is about a journey of improvement for children's services in the city with the intention of arriving eventually at excellent. Robert.
Thank you. I've just got a couple of things to pick up on home to school transport. Some of the comparisons that are made between September and then March. Obviously, that's not a comparable period. So can we get the same data circulated to members for March to March, so March 21 to March 22? And indeed, it might be useful to also include a pre-COVID year, just so that you've not got the impact of COVID in there, so people can see the proper journey rather than just looking at a snapshot mid-year. In terms of obviously the key test of the service is going to be September this year. So are we able to get any assurances at this point that those service issues have been addressed, so there won't be the issues that have been in previous years this September? And then the other question is just following up on what you mentioned about the IT system. Given the two different dates between the Commissioner's update and the Directorate Improvement Plan here, when is the IT, or as the improvement plan describes it, fit for purpose IT system going to be in place? Is it going to be September this year, as the Commissioner says, or is it going to be between 23 and 25, as the improvement plan says? Thank you.
Back to that. John.
Thank you. And clearly this report was being put together, as it states, before the Coughlin report was published. And these are necessary steps for reform to take services forward. My question is quite simple, because the Coughlin report was published on May the 20th. And in his recommendations, he's very clear that the council must implement his recommendations if these services aren't to go to trust. Will there be a report coming to cabinet with the council's full response to those recommendations?
Sure there will, actually. But let me bring in Bridget, and then I'll bring Karen back.
Thank you. It was just to pick up on some of Councillor Mackey's comments around a trust model. Obviously, I was the cabinet member when we created the Children's Trust. I think what shouldn't be underestimated is the sheer amount of time, effort and money that goes into creating such a model. At the end of the day, what improves a service is the quality of its leadership and the plans around it to drive forward that improvement that are needed. The governance structure is a whole other debate. In creating Birmingham Children's Trust, it took us more than a year of legal negotiations, of working through things with finance, of setting up contracting and so on, during which time, of course, the service remained with the council. Trusts are not a quick fix and not an off-the-shelf model, particularly in this line of work. There is no model that you can take off the shelf anywhere in the country. They are wildly expensive. We've made it very clear to government that were we to go down that route, they would need to fit the bill for that, because there is no way that we can divert a penny from improving services for children towards negotiating with lawyers and finance people and setting up contracts for the year it would take. It is a huge undertaking. So I just want everyone to be clear in the room about what exactly it is when we're talking about putting in something like that. It's not a quick fix. It is not a magic bullet, as we've seen with all of the children's trusts up and down the country, and there are many varied models on that with very varied levels of success. I think it's just important we understand what we're talking about when we bandy around words like that.
I don't disagree with that, and I know that what I'm about to say, Bridget won't disagree with either. I mean, what we're focusing on the outcome for the children here, and I think that's the important thing. And I think that the trust for the Children's Trust has come out, has given children a really good outcome, better than they were getting before. And I think that's why, on this side we're looking at the trust model, because we want that same outcome for our children in this area. And I know you're not saying that you don't want that outcome. I'm just saying that's what we're looking for.
What you may not be aware of, Ewan, is that, before I say that, can I agree with you that the Birmingham Children's Trust is doing an excellent job, and we want to see that excellent job continue. And 12 months ago, when I met with the then Minister Ford, her name was, we had a discussion about the option of putting SEND into the Birmingham Children's Trust. Both the Minister and myself were concerned, though, that such a move might destabilise the Trust and interrupt the Trust's improvement journey. And we both concluded that meeting by agreeing that that was something we did not want to see happen. So we have accepted the recommendations in the Commissioner's report, including the recommendation that we wholly commit to improving these services in-house. Karen.
I think there's also a point, I won't repeat what my colleagues have said. There is also the point that most of my colleagues on this side of the table also have an impact on children's lives, and that kind of link is maintained by not putting the rest of children's services into a trust model. Councillor Thompson's portfolio has a direct impact on the lives of children in the city. Councillor Clements has an impact on how children can get around and access facilities. And last time I did this, I managed to involve everybody, including adult services, because of the aspirations of young people for their families and for themselves. So I wouldn't want to see those links lost. And I'm on board with making our services work for our children, young people and their families, and keeping them within the City Council in line with the Commissioner's recommendations. I will hand over in a second to Sue on the September date for homeschool transport. And also on the risk management aspects. Just to come back to Councillor Hunt, the mismatch with the dates is that the Commissioner's report was written some time ago, and recommendations both in this report and those going to the SEND Improvement Board are therefore aligning with that. The publication date was delayed, I believe, because of the local elections.
That's correct.
That's trust. Yes, we'll look at the dates for the data, Councillor Alden, to make sure that things match. I am looking forward to tomorrow's SEND Improvement Board. It'll be my first day of my third week, and I'm also looking forward to continuing the conversation with the Commissioner, with officers, so that we can follow through on all those recommendations. So can you pick up those points?
Thank you, Councillor, for the around the risk and mitigation of risk section. I'll certainly take that back, and in the paper in September, I'm happy to say more on how we do intend to mitigate the risk of instability and the other points that you raised. In terms of the homeschool transport service, we are making some good improvements with that service, and I can reassure you that we've put significant steps in place to ensure that this September will be a smooth start. I'm quite happy to arrange a briefing session for members to go into more detail about the procedures that we've put in place to ensure that things like DBS checks are absolutely where they need to be, and to make sure that we're doing our utmost to make sure that we've got an efficient and timely service. Our timeliness now is up to just below 99%, 98.8%. Obviously, we're aiming for that 100%. I do want to manage some expectations and share here that in the first week of any new school term, the start of an academic year in any council, there will always be a few instances where there might be delays, etc. There should not be children taken to the wrong place, and there should not be big mistakes that have been made in the past, and we've taken every step that we can to prevent that. But in reality, there will always be a few delays and a few, not everything will run smoothly, but it's certainly much improved, and we're hearing much better feedback from parents and carers now. And as I say, I could go into more detail with Mike Fagan, who's our acting assistant director for homeschool transport. I've discussed this morning with him, making sure that we're able to provide you with a full briefing before the end of this academic year, so that we're able to share the progress that we've made and reassure you that the homeschool transport service is definitely in a much better place.
Thanks, Sue. I think members would want to take up your offer of a briefing. Paragraph 8.10 in the report talks about a plan being presented to CLT and the lead member in June of this year, but then goes on to say, and to Cabinet in September of 2022. September of 2022 will, of course, be too late. Could I ask you to look at that again, because it would be better if that plan was presented to Cabinet in July rather than September.
Of course, we'll do that.
Liz?
Thanks, Leader. Yeah, I absolutely support the main thrust of this report, which is to establish a stable leadership team. But I wanted to just ask Karen and Sue about the other task, which is really to start reducing the reliance on agency staffing in the ranks. Really to look at how we actually make the whole establishment more stable. So that's one question, and then really just to welcome what Karen said about the corporate drive on a child-friendly city, which has been recommended by the Commissioner. And I think that certainly in transportation in highways, we've got a big agenda that's already set out in the manifesto that the Labour Council has just been elected on. And it's all about keeping children safe on our roads and making sure that the environs of schools are safe. And I know that's also a shared agenda with the council motion that Councillor Hunt put in earlier in the year. And if you think about car-free school streets, some of the impetus for that, or the main impetus for that, came from Councillor Timothy Huxtable, who'd seen that operating in Solihull. So I think we've genuinely got the opportunity to do something corporate there, and I hope that transportation and highways will make a big contribution and building what it's already doing. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Karen, anything to add?
I think what we're looking for is a virtuous spiral upwards where our services for children and families become a better place to work, and therefore people want to take on permanent roles, that their caseloads are appropriate, and that they see the results of what they're doing. And if we're having that impact on staff within the service, they will talk to colleagues in other parts of the country, and we will find it easier to recruit. And I think that goes for quite a number of areas across the council where we're struggling to recruit. This one is obviously my focus, and as I've already said, we do need to look at the whole of the council being child friendly, not just those services which come within children and families. Sue, anything to add on that?
only to advise that we are shortlisted on Friday for the substantive assistant director for Send and Inclusion. So we are starting to make inroads. And as part of the baselining report that I'll bring to you, that will state the number of interims and our targets for reducing those numbers of interims as time goes on. Because much of our work is relationship based, isn't it? And we have some great interims actually doing some good work. And our first port of call will be to try to convince them to become permanent members of staff so that we can really work on that relationship based approach with our children and families. Because again, it's about the best service for families, isn't it? And this isn't the most cost effective way to run the directorate, and it's not the best relationship based is the model that we want to pursue. And if you're not a permanent member of staff, it's more difficult to achieve that. So again, that's something that will be an iterative journey, but one in which we're already making the right steps in terms of stabilising my leadership team. The next level down will be the heads of service, and as you say, that the frontline workers as well. And I think the image used by Councillor McCartney of a virtuous circle is absolutely right. And all the time, we're promoting Birmingham as being a really good place to come and make a difference to children and young people. So I haven't got anything else to add apart from that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd need to point out there is a drafting error in the recommendations section of the report. Paragraph 2.1.8 is not a recommendation. Therefore, can we agree recommendations 211 through to 217? Agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 12 then, use of household support fund. Karen again.
Thank you, Leader. The report sets out how the City Council, in partnership with the voluntary sector, will continue to support the most vulnerable households in the city over the coming months through the Household Support Fund. This is much needed and essential support to struggling households across the city. The grant is available for 6 months only and is for essential goods and supplies such as food, energy, water supply, crisis arrears support, and will be spread as set out in the report across the voluntary sector, some for our most vulnerable elderly citizens through adult services, and also directly through children. So the detail is there for you. It's regrettable that it's only a 6-month package. I would ask all members to make sure that their residents know how to access this funding, but I fear that it is only a sticking plaster really on a wound that needs long-term and substantial treatment. But that's what's on offer, and that's what we are putting to you today, that we should distribute in this manner.
Thanks very much, Karen. Any comments on this? Very similar to the previous tranche of money we had and how that was distributed. So can we agree then? Recommendations 211 through to 215.
Agreed.
Does anybody wish to take a comfort break at this stage, or are we okay to press on? Thank you. Item 13 then is the Pines School, approval for capital works to create a 2-storey classroom block and car parking to increase key stages 1, 2 and 3 provision. Karen?
And this is my last one for today, ending on another good news story at one of our special schools. The Pines currently has 244 pupils on roll with moderate or severe learning difficulties, autism, or social, emotional and mental health needs, and this would increase the number of places to 270 by 2023. The project will create a 2-storey classroom block with an additional 16 places in September and a further 16 places next year. And the procurement group is the Constructing West Midlands 2 framework agreement. And again, like the earlier reports, subject to approval, this project will commence later this month and be completed by September.
Thank you very much. Ewan?
Yeah, I mean, good news. I mean, but just picking it away at it, obviously 3 million framework for consultants to support a digital strategy. I'm not really sure why it didn't come at the same time as the strategy itself, came to cabinet. So this thing where something comes to cabinet, can we have some funding for it, get approval, then a little bit later come back to cabinet, can I have another £3 million, please, because we need to spend some more money on it. And it just nice and neater, and everyone in cabinet could see what they were approving if it all came at the same time.
Ewan, are you on 14?
I am indeed, yeah.
Yeah, we're on 13.
Oh, I must apologise.
That's what you managed looking at me.
Suddenly I was looking at your face there thinking maybe I'm talking about the wrong thing, but thank you so much, and I've given you a heads up anyway for what I'm going to say.
Well, we'll note your comments for the next report. Does anybody have any comments on the Pines School, item 13? In which case then, can we agree recommendations 2.1 through to 2.4?
Agreed.
Item 14, stand ready, Ewan.
Thank you so much. Heads up. Do you know what? I just moved straight past the Pines School, so apologies for that. But
hang on. 14 is the call-off framework to accelerate digital transformation. Jane.
Thank you. Right, good morning, everybody. I'm here this morning to present a paper for a call-off framework to accelerate digital transformation. You'll be aware that the Council's digital strategy is the key enabler to support the delivery of improved services for our citizens and helping us be more efficient and effective in our in-service delivery. Digital initiatives are an essential ingredient for successful transformation and innovation. In developing our own skills to do digital transformation is our preference. We need to recognise that at this moment in time, we don't have enough people with these skills. And the demand for these type of initiatives is high, given the Council's ambitions and challenges. So whilst we've reviewed several options that would enable us to augment our own teams to meet this demand, they currently don't meet the need. The paper recommends putting in place a call-off framework with strategic partners committed to Birmingham City Council, who will be briefed and ready to come in and support us where there is a particular demand. There will be no obligation to spend with the providers on the framework, but having it pre-populated helps when we do need that demand. So the paper also recommends that we attach funds to the call-off framework from the Transformation Fund, recognising that some projects will already have funding in place from service budgets or capital funding. This will ensure that we can maintain pace on our digital delivery and improving services to citizens where digital projects have a business case. So I've asked, therefore, that we take recommendations 2.1 to 2.4 in this report. Thank you, Luke.
Thank you. Before you repeat what you've already told us, do bear in mind this is of the Council's transformation plan. And what is happening here is money is being set aside that can then be drawn down for digital transformation of the Council services. That is what's actually happening. So, your comments.
Yeah, I did. I mean, apologies for that. I think I did the same thing in 2019, so don't worry about it. It's not the first time I've spoken on about one report when we're still on the previous one. Yeah, I mean, I won't repeat myself for what I've already said. I mean, if you want to be positive about it, the saving grace here is that you've got partners working alongside existing staff to upskill them, sort of give positive advice. I think possibly we should probably look to try and make sure we retain those staff if we're going to upskill them. I think the last thing we want to do is train people up and then obviously lose them to the wider market. And it's good that there's a framework in place rather than using an SCN. Just picking up your last bit, and this bit was said there, was that I think in section 7 it talks about the need to deliver savings that are identified in the MTFP for digital transformation, but isn't this being taken from the Invest to Deliver Reserve Board? So are they not two separate things?
Sorry, what was your first one?
It was just that in section 7, it talks about this is the need to deliver savings as identified in the MTFP for digital transformation, but isn't the funds from this being taken from the Invest to
Yeah, they are. Yeah. Well, the idea is that they will deliver a saving to the council. Okay, Jane, any Anything further?
I think me.
In which
Thank
case
you.
then, can we agree with recommendations 2.1 through to 2.4? Agreed. Item 15 then is the increase in contract value for the provision of webcasting council meetings. Jane again.
Thank you, Leader. That's me again for asking for a small amount of money. This report provides details of the previous planned procurement activity report for webcasting council meetings that was approved by Cabinet originally in January this year, with the estimated value of £400,000 over a 5-year period. An open procurement exercise has been conducted and the contract value is 499038. This report is being presented to Cabinet because the contract value following the open procurement exercise exceeds the planned procurement activity report by 20% and is a requirement according to our council's constitution. It's suggested the reasons for the increase in costs is due to the changes in the market since the soft market test was conducted. And other factors to take into account include COVID-19, the increased cost of hardware and microchip shortages, which have also impacted on the project. I'm therefore asking Cabinet to approve an additional budget of £99,038 to allow the Council to progress to the contract award stage and subsequent installation of the webcasting hardware and software. Thank you, Leader.
Ewan, I thought you might have a comment on this.
Yeah, I mean, I've been on it for a while. I mean, when I saw it come through, I wasn't totally surprised when I saw they were looking for increased funding of it. I think it's important that, openness and transparent, people can see what's going on in the council and how we're spending the money. So I think the reasons, I was going to say excuses, the reasons given that I was a bit surprised about. I've been involved in this, talking to Peter Bishop since sort of very early days when there was the previous supplier, and I think we all agreed it wasn't good enough. And then what coming out, but the initial estimates were made in October 21. And so whilst there's been increases made since October 21, COVID was around then. I mean, it was was it 2 years ago? I mean, we approved, was it a 3 million increase in the hardware requirement at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, because we could see then that the heavy metal need for data storage was going up. So this has been around for a long time. But I'd say it wasn't totally surprising, because I think it was a year ago, might have been long ago, the team doing this came and spoke to Councillor Alden for myself, and they asked for our feedback and what we said we wanted. I think they said that the leader himself had suggested that they asked me a few questions about what we wanted, so we fed into that. And then 2 months ago, they said they had a follow-up meeting and asking us to expand upon what we wanted from that meeting of about a year, 18 months ago. And they said, OK, we'll take it to our suppliers and we'll see if they can deliver that. So I was a bit disappointed that, we have a meeting 18 months ago, and then now here we are looking at implementation, or they're getting close to it. And they're saying, well, sorry, can you explain more about what you want? We'll go back to them and ask, can you deliver that? And so I'm not totally surprised that they're coming back and saying we want a 25% increase, because if that's the pace that they're moving at, they may well suddenly find out they've gone back to the supplier, I'd suggest, and suddenly said, can you do all this? But then maybe that's not the case.
I'm not sure whether you're complaining that we came back to you and consulted you further, or whether you're complaining that we're actually taking on board your comments.
He was actually complaining that it took them 18 months to actually respond and hadn't done anything about them.
Thank you for that clarity. I was making those comments tongue in cheek. John.
I guess you were.
Well, thank you. I think it would have helped if I had an exempt report on this, unless I've missed one, because what we don't know from this is the extent to which the price range has been affected by the valuation criteria, of which price was only 30%. And I know we want good quality for this, so 45% for quality. I understand all that. Social value 20%. But it would be interesting to know, and I think I'd have thought Cabinet would benefit from knowing the extent to which the choices were affected by the evaluation criteria, or whether whether there were bids which might potentially come in within budget, depending on the sensitivity of the evaluation criteria, because it's not clear from this report whether there were or not.
Okay.
Jane, I'm not sure whether you're going to be able to pick that up, because it's not technical.
Yes. I think, can I bring Sarah into some of the financials?
I was just going to say, actually, Cheryl Duran is here on.
Sorry, we don't have anybody in the flesh.
hopefully are able to come to our rescue on this. Pick up that technical question that Councillor Hunt has just asked.
I will need to check on whether, but my understanding was there was only one bidder that met all of the requirements that came in, so price wouldn't have been a factor.
Okay. Anything further to add then, Joe? No? In which case then, can we agree recommendation 2.1? Thank you. Item 16 then is planned procurement activities for the period July this year through to September. Yvonne?
Thank you. First of all, can I thank the previous cabinet this report details the planned procurement activity for the period July 2022 to September 2022 and all contract awards decisions made under Chief Officer delegations during the previous quarter. So at the 1st of March 2016 meeting, the Council changes to procurement governance were agreed which gives Chief Officer the delegated authority to approve procurement contracts up to the value of 10 million. If the award of a contract will result in staff employed by the Council being transferred to the successful contract under 2P, the contract award decision has to be made by Cabinet. This report acts on the process to consult with and take soundings from Cabinet members and the Resource and Overview Scrutiny Committee. It sets out the planned procurement activity over the next few months. Individual procurement may be referred to Cabinet. At the request of the Cabinet, a Cabinet member or chair of the Resource Overview and Scrutiny Committee, where there are sensitivities or requirements that necessitate in the decision being made by the Cabinet. A briefing note with details for each item to be procured is listed in Appendix 2. The financial information for each item is detailed in Appendix 3, exempt information. In relation to consultation leader, the Cabinet members of Resources, Overview and Scrutiny Committee chairs have not indicated that any planned procurement activity needs to be brought back to the Cabinet for executive decision. Therefore, I ask that you take the recommendations 2.1 to 2.2.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. Anybody on the list of planned procurement? Robert.
Thank you, and congratulations, Councillor Mosquito. And with this being the last item, congratulations to all the other new Cabinet members who haven't had a report today, so I haven't been able to say that yet. I just wanted to, I've got two questions on the job evaluation specialist resourcing procurement, and that might, the answers on that might lead to a further question. So the first is, the recommendation, it talked about for an initial 12-month period with an option to extend for a further 18 months. Just to be clear, are we saying that's 12 plus 18 or 12 plus 6 to create 18? Just so we can have some certainty on that, because obviously that's an 18-month extension to a 12-month one is quite a long extension. And in the value for money section, it talks about value for money be proven by getting a discounted day rate compared to what we've been paying for their 20-day piece. What will happen if we don't secure a lower day rate? Are we going with this person anyway, or are we going with someone else?
So on the first one, it does read 1 year with an option to extend for a further period of up to 18 months. Sarah?
Yeah, I agree. I think I don't know whether Dan wants to be on that one actually, because it is a HR one, isn't it?
Yeah, it's job evaluation specialist resourcing.
Do you want to talk to that, Darren?
I need to go and confirm that, I'm afraid. Don't have those details with me.
Well, we can only go with what's written in the report at the moment, and that is 1 year with an option to extend for a further period of up to 18 months.
That's fine. Yeah.
So we're taking that as the total would be 18 months.
No.
We're saying it's 12.
For a further period, so it's 2 years, 2.5 years.
Just so we all understand what's. And then the other question about what will happen if we don't actually get a lower day rate? Are we going ahead with it anyway, or is the council going to seek a different provider?
Sorry, on the job evaluation program, it is 18 months. Well, so that should be 18
So it's for a further 6 months then?
It's only ever going to last 18 months from this point on, so I can confirm that.
Okay, so if we can amend that, the words there to read 1 year with the option to extend up to 18 months. That's what it should read. Happy?
Yep, and then the second point?
And the second point
isn't cheaper than the day rate?
Yeah, if you can't get, yeah, if it isn't cheaper than day rate, what's the answer to that?
Again, I need to confirm, I'm not entirely sure.
Okay, can we come back to you outside of this meeting then, Robert, on that?
Yep.
Okay, if there's nothing else, we agree then recommendations 2.1 and 2.2. Agreed?
Agreed.
We will now come back to item 8, which is the disposal of 153 to 161 Corporation Street, known as the Murdoch Buildings, Birmingham B4 4HP is the postal code for this. Given that, John, you want to raise something on the exempt appendix, what I'm going to do is move to the private